So if there's one thing that goes hand in hand with the dead bedroom, sexless marriage, it is masturbation and porn. Did you see what I did there? Welcome back to the Secure Husband Podcast. Bruce Abbott, certified professional coach, founder of SecureHusband.com. This is our last episode in the series on the sexless marriage. Honestly, I could have done a 3-month-long series on the sexless marriage and dead bedroom. There is so much content to create on this, but I tried to condense the most important things down into just the 8 or 10 episodes that I did over this month. So when we talk about porn, we talk about masturbation, we talk about the sexless marriage and the dead bedroom, this is often an uncomfortable topic for guys to talk about. It's not something that you can talk to your wife about. If you're fortunate to have really good male friends, you can talk to them about it, but it's not always the case. You got to really be close and good friends. The thing about porn and masturbation is it impacts a dead bedroom. You might be saying, okay, well, no, my wife is what's impacting the dead bedroom. Hear me out on this. And this is not to shame or judge. Look, I understand the world we live in. I understand porn is all over the place online. My own history with it is I struggled with it when I was younger. I actually reached a point where it was so not tactile. It was so distant and fake and not real that I reached a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. Porn did nothing for me. That's not any kind of moral judgment against pornography or anything. But what I am saying is that I get it. It's there. And if you're in a dead bedroom, you're in a sexless marriage, often you feel like that's all I got. If I'm being truthful, if she is not providing intimacy or connection, there's no sex going on at home, that's all I have. I hear you. Porn becomes your release and your escape at that moment. And yeah, it makes sense. Surface level, it makes sense. You have a biological drive, you have a need, and this feels like the only way to meet the need. Here's where the problem lies. What starts as a physical outlet becomes a pattern, and then that pattern starts working against you. Go back to that last podcast that I just did about being bold, and I talked about alcohol. Alcohol used to be a pattern as part of sexual moments with my wife. And my wife says, it was good until it wasn't good. It was fun until it wasn't fun. But alcohol became a pattern in the sex, and then that pattern started working against you. Porn, masturbation, it's the same thing. It's a pattern that you have until it creates problems. So why does this happen? There's the release that you have when you watch porn and you masturbate it, but it starts to shape your brain, rewires arousal patterns, it rewires expectations. It provides dopamine floods that's hard to get in other places. Men who excessively watch porn or excessively masturbate also have excessive issues, usually with alcohol, maybe with food, gambling, other areas. It's the dopamine rush. It's the addiction. But it rewires. We talk about neuroplasticity in rewiring your nervous system. This works the same way. Your brain's neuroplastic. You can wire it in unhealthy ways. Porn shapes your expectations and arousal patterns without you even realizing it, because your body now gets used to this idea of instant stimulation. It's easy. You have total control over the situation. You always have novelty. You can mix it up and whatever your thing is. But your body also is not experiencing real intimacy. And then we get into the physical issues. A lot of guys that I've talked to, I've had this back when I was younger, is the porn, the masturbation. You may be in a sexless marriage and finally you have sex. And what happens? You can't perform. You can't finish. And now what should be like, yes, I have this moment. Now frustration comes through, because here you go. It's like you're wanting this moment. It's here, but your body now doesn't respond the way that you want it to. And then you get so frustrated. It's because of the rewiring. And if you're somebody who masturbates more than on occasion, your body is not going to be adjusted to what real sex with a real woman feels like. I know I'm getting into some really TMI categories here, but this is a big deal in marriages. If you've ever heard about guys talking about the death grip, I mean, this is not something that men are going to just share with other men. But if you're somebody who frequently masturbates, what happens? Your body and brain adapt to that masturbation, that certain level of stimulation. And then when you get real sex in front of you, it's not as intense and it's not as stimulating. You don't control it as much, and it creates problems. You have difficulty finishing. You have difficulty maintaining arousal. Yes, as men get older, there are ED issues. Some men respond well to the Cialis drugs, the Viagra drugs, but in many different situations, this is tied to excessive masturbation and porn. Here you get an opportunity. Your woman finally is in the mood. A lot of sexless marriages and dead bedrooms are not 100% sexless and dead. There are some. I've got a handful of coaching clients where there is nothing, zero. But for some of these men, they get a shot once every few weeks or maybe even a couple of months, whatever. You get your opportunity. A lot of men get frustrated because they didn't know that opportunity was coming. And what happens is, I remember talking to a guy, he was so frustrated because he hadn't had sex in like a couple of months. And he literally, like just that afternoon, he had some time alone and he masturbated. And then his wife actually initiated sex that night and he couldn't perform. They hadn't had sex in months and he couldn't perform. He'd blown his shot. I know, that was a groaner. The cycle now becomes unhealthy. And what happens when he can't perform? The wife gets frustrated. And now you just fed that dead bedroom. You fed that sexless marriage. Be mindful of that. It's a cycle. You don't get sex at home, so you turn to porn. Porn conditions your body, it conditions your mind. Then when sex happens, it doesn't go well. That creates more frustration. That sends you back to porn, and now you're stuck in the loop. It's more than just physical, it's relational. I also want to talk about porn with unrealistic expectations, especially for the guys that are up in their 40s, 50s, 60s. We've probably heard over and over, porn is not real. The reason that it can be damaging in relationships is because it's not real. And a lot of men tend to kind of blow that off. And they do that because when they hear that, they think of the really cheesy stuff, Knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm a plumber. I'm here to lay some pipe. Oh, you're here to lay some pipe? Wah, 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 wah. That is not reality. But what happens is a lot of men, because porn has a plethora of varieties and niches and genres and all of this stuff, but what do? They go searching for content that is most closely real and aligned to their real life. This is why you see older men going and looking up. That's why there is mature, over 50, amateur content, because men are looking for something that is close to reality. But here's the thing, that's still not reality. That's still fake. What do I mean by that? So what happens in these particular situations, you see people in their 50s that are A, videotaping themselves, not something you're going to see a lot in real marriages. These are people that are on public display having sex. Again, not something you're going to see in real marriages often. You're going to see the partner initiating very forward in very, very sexual ways. And it's just enough to remind you of those early days in dating, those early days in your relationship where she did initiate and you couldn't keep your hands off of each other. Well, now you're seeing people in their 50s, or their 40s, 60s, whatever, can't keep their hands off of each other. You look at that, and to you, that's reality. Sex doesn't really work like that for people as they get older. Okay, yeah, maybe in your 20s. But again, most of the men that I listen to are like 35 and up. That's even that real sex content, that amateur content creates false expectations. But you gravitate to that because that is the closest thing to reality that you see. Now, you start comparing that reality, because it says real, to your reality. Do you see where this now can fuel a dead bedroom? Now, it may look like two people that are really engaged emotionally, very connected, very present with each other, but it's still a performance. The end goal there is still views, likes, shares, so your expectations start to shift without you realizing it. So you're just like, well, I don't watch unhealthy porn, I watch healthy porn. Healthy porn? Yes, I look to see what people in their 50s or 40s or whatever should be doing in the bedroom. Is that reality? And then there are some of you guys that try to video your wife doing that, and she finds out because you're trying to recreate that porn experience, that real sex tape experience with your wife, and it blows up in your face. So it gives you those unrealistic expectations. Porn is emotionally disconnecting. It's a solo experience. Now, I do know couples that experiment with like mutual masturbation and they do that stuff together. That's awesome. That's connection. That's reality. That's couples being together, physically doing things, connecting emotionally. Yeah. But porn and masturbation is almost always a solo experience. It's just you. It's just you. No vulnerability, no emotional connection. And if that becomes your primary outlet because it's easier to do that than to do the things to help foster real intimacy, and I get it, some of it comes out of frustration. You're like, Bruce, I've tried. I cannot get intimacy from this woman. Porn is all I've got. Masturbation's all I've got. I hear you. Go back and listen to all the stuff this month. There's a lot to unpack behind that. But the porn trains you away from real intimacy. And what is one of the most important things for a woman in a relationship? Emotional trust, emotional safety. What happens when you forget to shut that browser window? When you forget to close that tab and she finds it? What happens? For women, that feels like betrayal. Not because of the act itself, but because of what it represents. Secrecy, disconnection, comparison. In a marriage that's already struggling, that is going to destroy emotional trust even further. I've got a buddy of mine whose wife found out about his porn, and what she did was very interesting. He was telling me the story that she knew about it. She didn't get angry at him, but she was hurt. And she finally brought it back up to him after several weeks. But in those several weeks, she just disconnected. She created all kinds of distance. And then there was tension in the marriage. He didn't know why, because he didn't know she had found it. They were struggling beforehand. You know, he would share stuff with me because he'd be like, hey, you're the coach. What do I do in this? They created now a whole nother layer of issues in their marriage. The fallout from that is real. But porn's temporary. Yeah, it gives you that boost of relief, that little dopamine rush. But one of the things that got me away from it was because literally right after that dopamine rush, the loneliness and disconnection hit harder after it. It was almost like by doing this, it just opened the floodgates for even more loneliness. It was like a crash. And that became more painful than the reasons to go to it in the first place. You know, we talked in the last couple of podcasts about energy, that shift in energy. When we talk about being confident, we talked about boldness. That last podcast was not an easy one for me to record. So far, I have not gotten too much negative feedback on that. Not as much as I really expected to. But when you rely on porn, your energy changes. Because what happens? You're less motivated to connect, even though it feels empty. It makes no sense. You become less present when you know more presence allows you to show up fully in a marriage. And in many ways, it starts to feed a selfish side of us because we become internally focused. And this is not about chasing, people pleasing, but what it does do is it takes all your focus and brings it inside to this porn, as opposed to what can I do to get my needs met from a real human being? Because all that stuff now shows up in your relationship, whether you realize it or not. And that energy can be diminished. Porn takes that vitality out of you. You would think that it might build you up. You would think that I'm a man, that it would fuel masculinity. It doesn't. Maybe when you're younger it does, but when you're 40, 50, 60, no, It takes the vitality out of you. Because those things, like I talked about last time, that bold action, you might not take that bold action in that situation where you're just, I want my wife right now. I crave my wife. I want her right now. Because what would you have done? I'm going to go take care of myself with porn instead. Do you see how this does not help you? I'm not saying you have to literally give up porn completely. This is not about being porn free, but as close as you can get to it. You don't have to be perfect at it, but you do have to realize that it is doing more harm than good. Because I know when I stepped away from it, it helped tremendously. I've got a couple of guys that have been porn-free, masturbation-free for a while, and they talk all the time about how there's a whole shift. Your desire shifts, your sensitivity shifts, that returns, but just the focus towards the real connection, the focus towards getting your needs and wants met by your partner, as opposed to just self-abandoning and going into avoidance, which is really what this disconnection sometimes is fueled by, avoidance. So this week, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, if you're somebody who struggles with this, I want you to just try to stop it this week. See if you can go this week without it. And just notice. Notice when intimacy does happen, if it happens this week. Notice the experience that you have. Notice your desire for real connection, and notice the drive to get your needs and wants met in reality. Not in fantasy, but in reality. Just notice how much more present you are. Okay, this is literally your mind and your body resetting. Try to do this week. And if you can make it 7 days, I encourage you to go 7 more. If you can't, go 1 day at a time. Because I understand, because it feeds the dopamine, it's an addiction. So that's why they call it addiction to porn. Try just going 1 day. Just go today. Don't do it at all today. And if you can make it through that, 1 day at a time. The next day, wake up and try to do it that 1 day. You're now going to reset everything. Because we may think that porn is a tool in a dead bedroom or a sexless marriage, that it is something that you need, that it's helping you to get through the loneliness. But it's really hurting you because it's keeping you stuck. And anything that keeps you stuck needs to be addressed. It needs to be taken care of. I get it. If you're in a sexless marriage, I understand why porn becomes part of the picture. I do. But if you really are serious about becoming the man that you want to be, you cannot ignore this area because it is working against you. I hope you got a lot out of this month-long series. Like I said, I could probably do 3 months on just the dead bedroom and sexless marriage. I will do more podcasts on sexless marriage and dead bedrooms. It is by far the most listened to content when I go into this area, because I do believe that this is such a struggle for so many men in these situations. If you're just catching this podcast for the very first time, this is your first Secure Husband podcast, I encourage you, hit that subscribe button. If you're a regular listener, would you take just a couple of minutes, go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, give me a review. The algorithm is feeding this more and more to men who are contacting me and saying, this is what I have been looking for. I have searched, I've listened to hundreds of podcasts, and they talk about this stuff, but they don't talk about what to do about it. They don't talk about the realities of it. Help the algorithm help other men. But if you need more, if you need accountability, if you need somebody to converse with, if you need somebody to help you through all of this because you don't have anyone to talk to, I encourage you, visit securehusband.com. Fill out that form for a free 30-minute consultation. It's just a conversation you and I have about your situation and if one-on-one coaching is something that can help you out. And I'll see you on the next Secure Husband podcast. Thanks for listening.